Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, as online violence targeting women continues to rise, artificial intelligence is set to take trolling to a whole new level. So will the European Union's new Digital Services Act make tech platforms a safer place for women? I'll be asking Asha Allen from the Centre for Democracy and Technology. Also, members of Uganda's lesbian community bravely speak out as the African nation's parliament passes sweeping anti-gay legislation that criminalises anybody identifying as LGBTQ+. This as the country's president urges politicians to reconsider the bill. But first, and threats, insults and abuse of women online are on the rise, especially since the pandemic. Many of the perpetrators of cyber abuse are using new digital tools for their content, and relatively few cases are prosecuted.
Whether it's in public, in the open or in the street, harassment and abuse of women is on the rise, and online insults and sexual threats now an increasing reality for many. In a recent Ipsos study, 84% of women say they've been abused online, with ethnic minorities or those identifying as LGBTQ at a greater risk.
The digital space is similar to the public space. It is a place where people who are not necessarily related will meet. We see that women are subject to the same judgments and admonishments over discretion, modesty, covering up, or not having political opinions.
Cyber abuse targeting women has intensified since the COVID lockdown, according to a UN report. A common method is the uploading of intimate pictures or videos of someone without consent to shame or blackmail them. In many cases, the abuser and others online sharing the material threaten the victim with rape or death. Online support groups say the perpetrators usually escape justice, with around 2/3 of complaints made rejected by police. On groups followed by tens of thousands of people, online abusers can even be rewarded if their content goes viral.
The creators will be more visible, have more subscriptions, more interactions, gain a larger audience, sometimes even earn sponsorships and even end up financing their digital presence.
With the rise of new technologies, online harassment techniques are said to be diversifying. In February, an American streamer, followed by 900,000 subscribers, said she'd been victim of a pornographic deepfake. Her face was found in a video modified by artificial intelligence on the body of a porn actress.
This is what it looks like to feel violated. This is what it looks like to feel taken advantage of. This is what it looks like to see yourself naked against your will being spread all over the internet.
In France, disseminating sexual content online without consent carries a 2-year prison sentence and a fine of €30,000.
Now, as the world watches with much interest as to what is going to happen to Twitter under Elon Musk's ownership, the European Union's new Digital Services Act is coming into force. This highly ambitious law aims to clean up the world's biggest online forums by tackling misogyny, curbing disinformation and protecting democratic elections, among others. Asha Allen is an intersectional digital rights advocate and the Advocacy Director for the Centre for Democracy and Technology in Europe. She joins me now from Brussels. Asha, thank you so much for your time. How significant is this new law in seeking to end online violence against women?
I think the EU's Digital Services Act could prove very significant when it comes to addressing online gender-based violence and, of course, many other harms that we see in the digital ecosystem. It is the flagship regulation for the European Union. It essentially sets the rules for how to tackle illegal content, but it also, quite uniquely, sets mandatory due diligence obligations for the very large online platforms and search engines to address systemic risks. And this specifically includes online gender-based violence. So now we will see the largest of the platforms, this includes the large social media platforms, having to conduct annual risk assessments to be able to address and mitigate those risks, including online gender-based violence.
But Asha, does it go far enough?
I think this takes us back to the root of how we should appropriately address online gender-based violence. It does manifest in multiple different ways. And as your report brilliantly mentioned there, it is deeply rooted in misogyny, but it disproportionately impacts groups such as women of color and those from historically marginalized groups. And there's only so far that regulation can go. We want to be able to address online gender-based violence in the best possible way. And that means ensuring that online harms are minimized, but at the same time, not unintentionally chilling women's free expression, especially at the time when it's needed the most. So we actually need to take a multi-pronged approach. And this means setting clear yet proportionate legislative frameworks, but at the same time demanding increased transparency, increased accountability, and increased due diligence from online platforms to address certain harms that may not be appropriately addressed through legislation.
And Asha, for those who think trolling amounts to the odd occasional rude insult online, it goes much deeper than that, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it is having a deep impact on the ability for us as a community and as a society, whether that's in Europe or globally, to take steps forward in achieving gender equality. We're seeing quite a lot of evidence and research into young women now silencing their own voices, removing themselves from online debates, but more importantly, not pursuing careers such as politics or going into journalism because they can see the amount of online abuse that they may face. So again, we're talking not only here about instances or one-on-one cases, we're actually talking about our democracies and equal participation and equity within those democracies.
And certainly the new EU law has the social media platforms well within its sights. So how are these companies reacting, especially given the growing concerns many people have about Twitter's future since Elon Musk took over?
Now, the reaction is that online platforms will now have to comply. This is a regulation that applies equally across the European Union, and they now have 4 short months to stand up to those particular obligations and abide by those. So it's important to see what will happen next. I think Twitter may in itself be proven to be quite an interesting case study because depending on how things develop over the next few months, it could be the litmus test for whether the EU's regulation actually has teeth.
And of course, this is all happening, isn't it, Asha, as we're just waking up to the rising use of artificial intelligence. So how is AI going to impact online violence, particularly online violence directed towards women?
Absolutely. And as the report mentioned there, we can see certain forms of AI already taking root when it comes to the proliferation of online gender-based violence. So this takes us back to deep fakes and the non-consensual sharing of images. And often you'll find that when deep fakes are used, particularly against politically engaged women, these are sexualized images. These are images used to try and discredit these women and chill their voices in the digital ecosystem. Now, the European Union is also aiming to address AI specifically. They are currently in the midst of negotiating the AI Act. So for civil society organizations like ours, it's absolutely paramount that the highest possible safeguards for fundamental rights are embedded into those frameworks and are harmonized with other frameworks such as the Digital Services Act to really make sure that our online ecosystems are much safer for all of us.
Asha Allen, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And in a significant move for the Catholic Church, the Pope has agreed for the very first time to allow a group of women to vote at an influential global meeting of bishops later this year. The new rules will give 5 religious sisters voting rights alongside 5 priests at the Synod, a papal advisory body. In the past, women were only allowed to attend the meeting as observers. And to Uganda now, and a group of women who are in hiding and being supported at a safe shelter have spoken out publicly about the risks they face identifying as lesbian. This as the Ugandan government clamps down on LGBTQ+ rights. A new law will make it illegal to identify as lesbian, bisexual, gay, trans or queer and would be punishable by a jail sentence. The country's president has called on the parliament to reconsider the bill after the US warned of possible economic repercussions if it became law.
together for support and hiding in the shadows. This is a safe house in Kampala for women holding a secret, knowing that outside these walls, just identifying as LGBTQ can put you in peril.
I can't go home right now because I don't know what I'm going to find home. It's a friend who sent me a message and like, you know what, people are talking about your queerness. So they wait for you to come back and they'll do whatever they want to do to you because you're queer.
Homosexuality has long been criminalized in Uganda, but last month the country's parliament passed the anti-homosexuality bill, which would not only make it a crime to identify as LGBTQ, friends and family would have a legal duty to report same-sex relationships to the authorities, and anyone who engages in same-sex activity could face life in prison. Repeat offenders could be sentenced to death. The West has widely condemned the legislation, urging the president, Yoweri Museveni, to veto it and threatening economic sanctions if he allowed it to stand. Museveni, who has made a slew of anti-gay comments in recent weeks, asked MPs to reconsider the law, saying in a letter, a distinction should be made in the bill between being a homosexual and engaging in acts of homosexuality. Meanwhile, gay people in Uganda are forced to stay in the closet. Coming out risks too much.
Like you look at yourself in the mirror before you get home, you're like, do I look too queer? Should I get my rainbows off because that's my identity?
Uganda is one of almost 30 African countries where same-sex relations are banned, but human rights groups say it stands apart for trying to criminalize a gay person's very existence.
And that's it for this edition. We'll love to hear your suggestions for the 51%, so do get in touch via Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And you can catch our previous shows on our website. So until our next program, bye for now.